Barely 10 years old, she was when the townspeople began to avoid her gaze. They said she walked barefoot in the snow, murmuring Latin prayers she'd never been taught. Her brother would follow her, silent and with glassy eyes, his fingers always twitching as if he were talking to someone no one else could see. When the sheriff finally went into the cabin, he discovered dozens of drawings stapled to the walls. Each and every one of them was of the same man, one figure, one face repeated endlessly. And the girl, she said just one thing, that's Jesus. He lives in my brother. Hello everyone. Before we begin, be sure to like and subscribe to the channel and leave a comment telling us where you're from and what time you're watching. That way, YouTube will continue showing you stories just like this one. In American history, there are families that time has attempted to erase. Lineages so corrupted by secrecy, so broken by bloodlines intertwining with themselves, that even their own descendants wince when their name is mentioned. This is one of those families. Deeply buried in a part of Arkansas no longer marked on maps lived a girl named Evelyn Thorne. Born in 1899, she was a child of silence, raised in a home with no visitors, no schoolbooks, and no mail. Her birth was never recorded. Her mother never left the porch. Her father never left the basement. Yet, 9 children were born into that house, each one darker, quieter, and stranger than the last. Evelyn was the youngest and the most dangerous. She was known in the town of Hollow Creek, not because she played with the other children, she didn't, and not because she misbehaved, she was painfully obedient, but because people said she listened too intently. Her eyes never blinked enough, and when she smiled, it made the hair on your arms stand straight up. Her brother, Jacob, 2 years her senior, was always by her side. They never spoke out loud to each other, but somehow, they moved in sync, walking, turning, blinking, as if controlled by one mind split between 2 skulls. A schoolteacher once called them the folded twins, even though they weren't twins at all. Or at least, that's what the town was told. By 1908, rumors had begun to spread. A nurse who had passed through the county claimed to have seen 3 Thorne babies born with fused jaws. A traveling merchant said the eldest boy had 6 fingers on each hand. But no one dared to approach the cabin to find out. No one wanted to confirm what they already feared, because Evelyn had started saying strange things, very strange things, things number 10-year-old should know. It was in the winter of 1910 that the town's unease turned to dread. A preacher named Wallace Benton rode out toward the Thorne property after Evelyn's mother sent word via a scribbled note left in the church pew. No postage, no greeting, just 4 words, "He walks in light now." Benton was no stranger to the strange. He had ministered in mining towns and remote hollows his entire life, but he later told his wife that what he saw that day haunted him more than the cholera pits in Missouri. When he neared the Thorne homestead, the land felt wrong, not exactly cursed, but tired. Trees leaned inward as if trying to protect or hide something. The ground was littered with animal bones arranged in spirals, and nailed above the doorframe, where a cross would usually be, was a crude carving of an eye with 3 pupils. Inside, the smell hit him first, damp soil and candle wax, but beneath it, something sweeter, spoiled. Evelyn's mother stood barefoot in a corner, arms outstretched, humming a tuneless melody. She never greeted the preacher and didn't even blink. Instead, she pointed toward the stairs with one shaking hand. Benton climbed slowly, every step groaning under his weight. At the top, the hallway was lined with children's drawings, hundreds of them, all identical, a tall man with golden light pouring from his eyes, a girl kneeling at his feet. Sometimes she was smiling. Sometimes she was bleeding. Sometimes she had wings. And at the end of that hall stood Evelyn, holding Jacob's hand. She whispered, "You came to see him." The preacher, frozen in place, could only nod. Evelyn turned to her brother and said something in Latin, perfect, flowing Latin. It wasn't taught in Hollow Creek. It wasn't taught in the state, not to girls like her. Then Jacob stepped forward, reached out his hand, and placed it on Benton's chest. Benton would later say it felt like fire under his skin, not heat, but judgment. He fled that day and never returned. But he left one final message pinned to the church door: do not go back. The girl is no longer alone in her body. After that, the town didn't speak of the thorns. The record stopped. The mail route was cut off, and Hollow Creek faded from the maps and from memory. But some of Evelyn's drawings survived. For years, the story of Evelyn Thorne was little more than a hushed warning, a kind of folklore parents used to keep children from wandering too far into the woods. But in 1964, during a land survey for a proposed state highway, something was uncovered that forced the legend back into the light. A collapsed structure, barely more than a rotted frame, was found half buried under vines and sediment. It was the Thorne cabin, still standing in its own way. Inside, they found relics that shouldn't have survived: tattered clothing, clay jars filled with teeth. But most disturbing of all were the journals, 7 of them, bound in leather, all written in the same jagged hand. Only the author's name changed. Volume 1 was signed, Martha Thorne, Mother. Volume 2, Jacob the Vessel. But the final volume, the 7th, had no name at all, just a symbol, that same carved eye with 3 pupils. The contents were even stranger. They weren't diaries, they were records, clinical, repetitive, obsessive. They contained dates, names, birth anomalies, ritual instructions, diagrams of the human nervous system labeled in dead languages, and sprinkled throughout the pages, references to the folding. Researchers brought in by the state were baffled. They assumed the family had descended into madness, a rural psychosis triggered by isolation, malnutrition, and inbreeding. But one linguist, a man named Dr. Emery Deeks, made a chilling discovery. He noticed the Latin phrases weren't just correct, they were lifted directly from pre-Vatican Catholic texts, some of which hadn't been translated into English until decades after the Thornes were presumed dead. How did Evelyn know them? How did she write them? Even more disturbing were the illustrations. Several pages featured a tall man surrounded by concentric circles, each one labeled with a word: light, voice, blood, fire. His hands were always extended outward, palms glowing, eyes hollow, and at his feet always the same image: a girl kneeling, hair over her face, offering him something that looked like a piece of her own skull. There were no photographs of Evelyn, no confirmed burial site, no confirmed cause of death. But in 1971, a fire destroyed the state archive that housed the journals. The blaze started in the middle of the night, its cause never determined. The journals were gone, except for one page, a single scrap salvaged from the ashes. It read, "The blood must fold inward again and again until the vessel breaks open and the divine spills out." The handwriting was childlike. The ink was fresh. By the early 1980s, Evelyn Thorne had become a ghost story in everything but name. Her tale was whispered in college anthropology classes and on late-night radio shows. But it wasn't until a private genealogist named Franklin Meyer began digging into Arkansas birth records that the bloodline came back into focus. Meyer wasn't hunting monsters, he was tracing his own lineage. A family rumor suggested his great-grandmother had escaped from a religious commune in the Ozarks sometime before World War I. Her name, Liza Thorne. Liza's name didn't appear in any census, no marriage license, no birth certificate. But Franklin's search led him to a crumbling courthouse in Baxter County, where a clerk, half curious, half afraid, handed him a box labeled, "Thorne, sealed 1911. Inside were records never meant to be seen again, 10 birth logs, all handwritten, with the same last name, different mothers, and the same father. The Thorne patriarch, whose full name was scribbled in once and then redacted in every other file, had fathered children with at least 3 of his own daughters. What Franklin found next was worse. The final log in the box wasn't a birth record. It was a report filed by a local doctor. It described a girl brought in after she was found unconscious near a dried-up creek bed. She was malnourished, delusional, and unclean. She responded to no questions except one: "Do you know who you are?" To which she whispered, "I am the gate through which he returns." The doctor's name, Dr. Emerson Clay, was scribbled at the bottom. His signature was dated February 3, 1911. That's the last known record of Evelyn Thorne. There was no follow-up, no discharge papers, no death notice. But Franklin Meyer couldn't let it go. He traced the doctor's lineage, hoping for some clue. He found Clay's great-granddaughter, a retired librarian named Alma, living just 3 towns away. When asked about Evelyn, Alma said something Franklin never forgot: "My grandfather told my mother that some people aren't born wrong, they're born open, and if something waits long enough, it walks in." She then handed Franklin an old shoebox. Inside were charred fragments of a child's drawing, faint but visible, a man made of light, a girl kneeling, and the words, "He lives in Jacob now." Franklin never spoke of his research again. He died in 1992, alone in a locked apartment with the windows blacked out and every mirror covered in bedsheets. There's a phenomenon folklorists rarely speak about, not because it lacks merit, but because it resists categorization. They call it ancestral bleed, a term used when family trauma doesn't just pass down through behavior or environment but seems to linger in the blood, memories, voices, and compulsions that surface in descendants who were never told the truth. And that brings us to 2004. A 14-year-old girl named Hope Whitmer was admitted to a psychiatric facility outside Little Rock. Her behavior was erratic, mumbling in dead languages, carving spirals into her own skin with her fingernails, and insisting she had a brother no one could see. The attending physician noted one phrase that she repeated more than 20 times: "He found me again." At first, the case was dismissed as schizophrenia, but one intern, curious about the peculiar phrasing, started digging. She ran Hope's name through archived records, and what she found set off a chain of silent panic among the administrative staff. Hope Whitmer was not her birth name. She had been adopted in 1991 at the age of 1 from a closed orphanage near the Arkansas-Missouri border. Her birth record was sealed, but the intern found something strange: a baptismal certificate, rare for orphans, signed with a surname scrolled across the bottom. It said, Thorne. That same intern, whose name remains protected, later claimed Hope would often stare at the walls of her padded room for hours at a time, only to say, "They folded wrong. That's why it hurts." Then she'd begin screaming the word Jacob over and over. When doctors asked her who Jacob was, she replied, "My brother, my father, my husband. He is the vessel, and he's coming." Hope escaped the facility in October 2006. Surveillance footage showed her walking calmly through 3 locked doors. None were damaged. None were left open. One nurse reported waking in the middle of the night to see Hope standing silently beside her bed. No one believed her until they reviewed the hallway cameras. Hope's body was found 43 days later in a dried-up creek bed just 10 miles from where Evelyn Thorne had last been seen. And in her pocket, a page torn from an old book, drawn in what appeared to be blood, was a 3-pupil eye and one sentence: "The blood folds inward until it opens." If you're still watching, you're already braver than most. Tell us in the comments what you would have done if this was your bloodline. By now, you might be wondering, was this all coincidence, generational delusion, the crumbling remnants of a family line too damaged to understand itself? But there's one more layer, one that even the skeptics can't quite explain. In 2017, a research team from a private historical society digitizing forgotten county archives stumbled across an unlabeled reel of film inside a rusted metal canister. It was found behind a false wall in what used to be the sheriff's office of Hollow Creek, now just a hollowed-out building reclaimed by weeds. The reel was black and white, silent, 27 minutes long. It showed what appeared to be a girl, 8 or 9 years old, standing motionless in a dirt clearing, surrounded by crude wooden totems. Her eyes never blinked, her arms never moved. Behind her, a boy stood just as still, with his hand placed over her head like a blessing or a curse. Every few minutes, she would open her mouth as if to speak, but no words came out, only static, as if the film itself was choking on silence. But the final minute was what shook the researchers. The girl finally turned to the boy. She smiled, and just before the reel cut to black, words appeared burned into the final frame. They weren't part of the original reel, they were scorched and later, almost etched by heat. She thought her brother was Jesus. She was wrong. He never left. The society never released the footage. The team's lead archivist went dark online, and when asked for comment, only replied, "Some stories are not meant to be remembered." But pieces of it leaked, screenshots, fragments, enough for independent investigators to match the facial structure of the girl in the film with a known photograph. It wasn't Evelyn. It was Hope Whitmer, filmed in a style only used in the early 20th century. And here's the impossible part, the film was chemically dated, developed on Kodacolor nitrate stock, last produced in 1922. She wasn't supposed to exist, and yet, there she was, smiling as if she knew you'd be watching. And the boy, his face was never clear, blurred as if the camera itself refused to see him. But one investigator claimed that when he digitally enhanced the footage, he saw something in the boy's eyes, not pupils, but flames. Some stories don't end, they simply vanish, waiting to be found by the wrong person at the wrong time. Since the release of that film fragment, there have been 8 reported sightings of a barefoot girl seen walking along dry creek beds in northern Arkansas, always alone, always silent, described by witnesses as smiling like she knows a secret too awful to say out loud. Each report is almost identical, down to the clothes, the expression, the vacant stare. In one case, a man claimed she looked straight at him, held up her hand, and mouthed the word, "fold." Now, here's the part no one wants to hear. In 2020, a team of amateur paranormal podcasters tried to retrace the steps of the Thorne family. They live-streamed from the area believed to be the original homestead. Their video was uneventful until the final 20 seconds. Just before the feed cut out, the camera panned toward the woods. There, in the distance, was a tall figure, not moving, just watching. The last thing heard on the recording was one of the hosts whispering, "Do you see his eyes? There's more than 2." The footage was taken down within 48 hours. The team disbanded. One of them is now institutionalized, refusing to speak except when alone. He scratches 3 small circles into the walls of his room every morning and never remembers doing it. And somewhere, deep in an archive that doesn't appear on any government index, is a burned journal, what remains of Evelyn Thorne's legacy. Its final entry reads, "I saw his face when Jacob died." It wasn't Jesus. It was older than that. Older than anything. Some believe the Thorne family was a tragedy, an American cautionary tale of isolation, inbreeding, and inherited madness. Others think they were part of something much older, a ritual line, a blood oath, a vessel. But maybe the truth is far simpler. Maybe Evelyn was right. Maybe she was the gate, and maybe we were never meant to find her. So, if you ever find yourself wandering the backwoods of Arkansas and you come across a spiral of bones or a totem with 3 eyes carved into its face, don't speak, don't run, just turn around and walk the other way. Because some bloodlines don't die, they just wait for someone to open the door again. If this story disturbed you, remember to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments. Tell us what you believe Evelyn became. Was she a victim or a vessel? Thank you for watching. You've just heard the story they tried to bury. This is Dark's Roots of America. Until next time.